That's nasty.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Chuck Nasty on Fantasy Football. It is week 7. We got a stellar game going on tonight between my Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not really sure what to think of the game, but I hope that Denver's D holds up like it has the last couple of weeks and that they don't get too far behind, because there's no way that Joe Flacco is going to be catching up at all. That's for sure. But either way, you might be wondering what this is. My wife got me a Sherpa. Not really sure what it is, but it is comfortable as hell. So I'm wearing it, okay? I'm rocking it. It's Thursday. We're watching some football tonight. First and foremost, we're going to do start 'em, sit 'em, week 7. I'm going to go through quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends to start this week, and some guys to sit based on bad matchups. Then we're going to go over my picks for the week in the pick'em pool. And as always, if you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, it always helps me out if you guys ring that bell, get notified anytime I drop a new video. That would probably help you and your league, whether it is the streaming defenses video on Tuesday nights, waiver wire pickup on Tuesdays, or the start 'em, sit 'em on Thursdays. So let's get right into it. Quarterbacks off top. Josh Allen. He's got Miami Dolphinitis this week, playing against the worst team in the National Football League. I'm starting him. And the reason I'm starting him is not only is he averaging over 16 fantasy points per game, but he has the Miami Dolphins this week. Did I say that already? Because Case Keenum threw 2 touchdowns against the Dolphins. Phillip Rivers threw 310 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Dolphins. Dak Prescott, 246 yards and 2 touchdowns. All in the past couple of weeks. So Josh Allen is going to get some points with his legs, and it's going to be an easy game for him. So definitely firing him up this week. Danny Dimes, a.k.a. Manuel Jones, a.k.a. Daniel Jones, plays against the Arizona Cardinals this week, who are 29th in points allowed to the quarterback position. Remember a couple weeks ago where Daniel Jones threw for 336 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then had 2 running touchdowns like week 3? Well, he hasn't had a couple of good weeks since then, but he's likely getting Evan Ingram back, which is huge. And he is also going to be getting Saquon Barkley back. So pretty big fan of the matchup this week. It's going to be a shootout. If there is an over that is in the mid-50s, I'm probably taking the over since neither of these teams have a great defense. But it's going to be good for Danny Dimes. So I know I'm starting him in one league. It's a good matchup this week. Jacoby Brissett of the Indianapolis Colts plays against the Houston Texans. It seems like the Texans are having shootouts with pretty much everybody lately. That's because they don't really have a good defense. But the last couple 2, 3, 4 games, Jacoby Brissett has basically had above 16, and he had a couple of 16-point games, I should say. He had a couple of 22-point games. But the Texans have given up 273 passing yards and 3 touchdowns to Patrick Mahomes, 330 passing yards and 3 touchdowns to Matt Ryan, and 318 passing yards and 2 touchdowns to Phil Rivers in the last couple weeks. So I'm optimistic that Jacoby Brissett has a good game. Him and T.Y. are going to be doing some damage, and I think Marlon Mack gets his on the ground too. So good start this week. Gardner Minshew, Secret Garden. The main reason why I'm telling you to start the Secret Garden this week is because the Bengals are missing a pair of corners. Okay, Dre Kirkpatrick was ruled out for this week already. I believe they're missing William Jackson as well. So they weren't good to begin with, but they're not going to be good now. They're not going to be decent now. I'm not sure where the scale goes, but they weren't good, and they're not going to be even not good this week, okay? Don't know if that makes sense, but the Bengals are banged up, and they're not good. So look for Leonard Fournette to feast. Look for Gardner to feast. Look for some DJ Chark to feast this week. It's a great matchup. 24th in points allowed to the QB position. Jimmy Garoppolo, 49ers is another matchup-based one. Most people aren't starting Jimmy Garoppolo every single week saying, hey, this is who I want to start, but he plays against the Washington Redskins, 28th in points allowed to the quarterback position. Past couple of weeks, Tom Brady put up 348 yards and 3 touchdowns. Mitch Trubisky, the Trubiscuit, King Mitch, the guy who can't hit one of his wide open receivers even if he wanted to, 231 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Skins. So I'm pretty sure Jimmy G has a good week as well. My last start at the quarterback position. Don't hate me for this because he burned me last week. But Jared Goff, okay? He got me negative 2.2 in one of my leagues last week. But you got to remember, recency bias is a real thing. The Rams are a good team. They're having some problems with the offensive line. But they had a really tough matchup last week against the 49ers. So the Falcons are not the 49ers. The Falcons aren't even half of what the 49ers are. And as a matter of fact, in 7 weeks so far, this being the 7th, of the first 5 weeks, there were 5 quarterback 1 overall fantasy point weeks put up against the Atlanta Falcons. And they're missing Keanu Neal. So they're a banged up team. They're allowing people to do whatever they want to them. And I don't think that's any different this week. I think that Goff has a bounce back week. I think his receivers have a good week. Hopefully Todd Gurley plays. That's a great avenue for Goff to get some dump off passes and extra yards. But 5 QB1 finishes have all been against the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think any other team has had that so far this year. So I'm starting Jared Goff again this week. I need a little bit of redemption because he cost me 3 leagues last week. I was projected to win by like 25 in 3 of my leagues, including one of my highest stakes ones. And I ended up losing by 9, and Goff had minus 2.2. Like, come on, man. All you had to do was get me 10 points, 11 points, and I would have won. Couple of sits at the quarterback position this week. Kirk Cousins was one of my big starts last week. The Lions have a bad run defense. The Vikings like to run the ball. And the only reason they threw the ball last week was because the Eagles have a secondary that funnels offenses into that kind of slot secondary range. They don't allow teams to run on them. They don't allow a ton of teams to throw outside. So they make you throw up the middle, which is why I had Kirk Cousins as a start last week. And, they don't have a great matchup as far as like corners this week for Cousins. So I wouldn't be surprised if he only threw the ball like 15 or 20 times. But Dalvin Cook is going to feast on the Detroit Lions on the road. So especially if the Vikings get an early lead, look for that to happen. But another guy that I have sitting this week is Sam Darnold. I own him with my boy Ryan. The only problem is he has a terrible matchup this week. He obviously looked good. They had this huge upset victory against the Dallas Cowboys. It was a big deal. And everybody knows how good the Patriots defense are this year. Everybody knows. But the biggest problem is that there have only been 2 QBs that have put double digits up against the Patriots, and they allow less than 8 points per game average to quarterbacks this season. So I don't want anything to do with starting Sam Darnold this week. And Robby Anderson is also on my sit list, which we'll go over in a little bit. Let's dig into some running backs. Tonight, my boy Royce Freeman, Denver Broncos, playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs' D has been pretty leaky this year to begin with. But Chris Jones is out also, which was like their primary run defender. Really like Royce Freeman tonight. The past couple of weeks, he's had 11 touches, 16 touches, 19 touches, 10, 15, and 16. And the Chiefs yield an average of 36.8 touches for 206 rushing yards and 1.3 touchdowns to opposing running backs. So those are just the average of the last 4 games. I think that both Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman feast tonight. And I really hope my boys pull off a W. Next up, Carlos Hyde, Houston Texans. He doesn't have a stellar matchup. I mean, it's decent. Like the Colts ranked 14th in points allowed to the running back position, but the Texans have looked really good. Like Deshaun's looked really good. Hyde is getting his every single week, and he's getting a ton of touches. Like he had 27 touches in his last game and 21 before that. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So fire him up this week as well, even though it's not a great matchup. Another guy I like this week is Frank Gore because he's got Miami Dolphin-itis. Miami is, surprise, surprise, 32nd out of 32 in points allowed to the running back position. And, the last 3 games, they've given up 201 total yards and 1.3 touchdowns, as well as 34.7 touches to opposing running backs. So Gore's going to probably see, 14 to 16 carries in this game at least. He's going to have the major opportunity to rack up his points on the ground. So big ups to him. Plug him in this week. James White for the New England Patriots. Now, superstar, if you want to call him that. It doesn't really seem like he's been much of a superstar since he's come back, but Josh Gordon is probably out this week. So there's going to be a couple of extra targets up there, and there is nobody better to have targets in that New England offense than James White out of the backfield. He gets a ton of work, especially in that passing game. PPR, diamond in the rough, except it's not really in the rough since everybody knows that he's good at catching the ball, and that's his primary duty there. But the Jets are 12th in points allowed to the running back position, and they're not giving a ton of rushing yards up to opposing teams. So I don't think that Sony Michel has a good week, but I think that James White might. They've got to use a running back in a productive way somehow, and I don't think it's going to be on the ground rushing. So the passing down work is going to be where the points are going to come. Latavius Murray for the New Orleans Saints. Now, most of you guys have probably been tracking Kamara, and he didn't practice again today, Thursday. Didn't practice yesterday, has a high ankle sprain that he's dealing with. And the most alarming part of this is that the Saints went out and signed another running back. They had initially they were in talks with Travaris Cadet, and they also ended up grabbing Zach Zenner, I believe. So bringing another running back in there is not a good sign for Kamara. They're probably looking for somebody to supplement the work with Latavius this week. He doesn't have a good matchup against the Bears, but the volume is going to be there. So, just keep that in mind. They got to run the ball at some point, and if it's a pure volume play that you're doing, plug Latavius Murray in there. Couple other starts for you this week. Tevin Coleman against Washington has a sweet matchup. He basically came back from injury and jumped right back to his spot as the primary ball handler on early downs in San Fran. And he's had at least 14 points and a touchdown in both of the 2 games since he came back. Washington allows the 5th most points to running back. So I think that Tevin pops off in this game for sure. Josh Jacobs, Oakland Raiders, had a great week against the Bears prior to going on bye. There was a lot of people that were actually talking about buying low on Jacobs because he hasn't had a super stellar year, but has been getting an increased workload, getting some catches as well in there for PPR leagues. But the Packers are pretty much bottom 5 in points allowed to the running back position. So I'm 95% sure that John Gruden knows that and is just going to hand the rock off to Josh Jacobs. So plug him in this week. My sits at the running back position, most of these, I only have 3. Most of these are probably pretty common, but you never know. Adrian Peterson, Washington Redskins. Now, he doesn't have a good matchup. As a matter of fact, it might be the worst potential matchup because the 49ers are on fire right now. And anytime the Skins get behind, which is pretty much every game except for the week they played the Miami Dolphins, the primary beneficiary of that is Chris Thompson in that backfield, getting some passing down work. AP doesn't catch the ball. They're not going to use him on third downs. He's going to get the early down work, and he's going against a stingy run defense of the San Fran 49ers. So definitely don't want to be plugging him in this week. My boy, he did a ton of work for me early this year, was one of my I don't want to say reaches, but I drafted him everywhere in the 6th round. Austin Ekeler has a tough matchup against the Tennessee Titans this week. The biggest problem is that the Titans don't really give a ton of points to the running back, the opposing running back. But the worst part about it is that the Chargers have looked progressively worse since the return of Melvin Gordon. So the only chance that he has to get any sort of respectable numbers up in PPR is if he gets 4 to 6 passes off in the passing game, to get a couple easy points and then breaks out, a 30, 40-yard run or something along those lines. I just don't really see it happening this week. And the Titans are top 8 in points allowed to the running back position, meaning 8th worst. Only 7 teams that are better than them. The other guy that I'm sitting at running back position this week is David Montgomery against the New Orleans Saints. Now, he's been getting more work. He is pretty much the clear RB1 in Chicago now, but he's only averaging like 3.4 yards per carry, and New Orleans is only allowing 3.38 yards per carry. So he's averaging like 0.03 yards more than the Saints are actually giving up. So it's just not a great matchup. The Saints D has been tough. You're not really sure what the Bears are going to do this week. I think they're probably going to win, but I don't think it's going to be with David Montgomery on the ground. So let's get in the wide receiver position. Guys that I am starting this week, I am starting a ton of Cooper Kupp this week. Now, you're probably in a league with some of those people that are like, my God, he burned me last week. It was terrible. Shut your mouth. Cooper Kupp is unreal good and has been a fantasy gem this year. If you drafted him in that 5th, 6th, 7th round, even in some of these leagues, he is scoring a lot of times more points than your wide receiver 1 that you drafted in that 1st or 2nd round, all right? So you give him a break. They had a bad week last week. They had a bad matchup. They have a great matchup this week that is going to be absolutely bonkers on that scoreboard. The Falcons and Matt Ryan have thrown over 300 yards. It is going to be a huge shootout in Atlanta, inside, and look for Cooper Kupp to bounce back this week. Next guy I'm starting is John Brown. Case of Miami Dolphinitis, baby. Now, a ton of people actually benched him last week, because of, or not benched him, I'm sorry, dropped him because he was on bye last week. And if he's on your waiver, go pick him up because he has a sweet matchup. If you're in a PPR league, even better. But it's always a good idea on, Wednesday specifically, maybe even Thursday, to check the waiver wire and see if there's anybody that other teams have potentially dropped, because John Brown got dropped in a ton of leagues on Yahoo at least. But has a great matchup this week against the Miami Dolphins. They're going to get shredded. Vegas projects that the Bills are going to win by 17 points. So John Brown's probably going to find his way into that pay dirt. You know what I mean? Other guys I'm starting this week, Michael Gallup in Dallas. There's a bunch of issues going on with Amari Cooper. He has some sort of a quad injury. They're not sure if Randall Cobb's going to play this week. And Michael Gallup led the way in targets. So they play against the Eagles, and you saw what happened to the Eagles secondary when Kirk Cousins threw the ball to Diggs, threw the ball to Thielen. The primary way to beat the Eagles is in the passing game. So the main beneficiary of that this week is going to be Michael Gallup. I might even go out on a limb and say that if you are in a 14 or 16 team league, very, very deep, and you absolutely need somebody at wide receiver, I'm not suggesting that you plug them in if you don't absolutely need somebody, but Tavon Austin's probably on your waiver wire as well. Somebody else is going to have to get targets there. I don't know who it's going to be, and Jason Witten's also a great streaming option this week. So things to keep in mind. If you come back in here on Monday and say, you told me to play Tavon Austin, I'm not going to know what to say, because I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying if you are really, really deep and you're hurting and you need somebody, he's probably available. So doesn't seem like there's going to be a whole ton of wide receivers from the Cowboys playing in that matchup this week. Another guy to fire up this week, Philip Dorsett against the Patriots. Josh Gordon's probably not playing because he's got his knee deal going on. Obviously, there's no more Antonio Brown there. Who else is going to catch the ball besides Edelman? N'Keal Harry's not back yet. He's practicing, but he's still technically on IR. I don't believe he's been activated yet. So they need to throw the ball to somebody. And if Edelman's the only remaining guy there, then it's going to be him and like Jacoby Myers. So I would definitely start Dorsett against the Jets. Next guy up is Mike Williams with the Los Angeles Chargers. Tennessee's got a good secondary. They do. I'm not denying that in any way, shape, or form. But the Chargers have to start scoring here. His past couple of weeks have been okay. I feel like he's ready for a big breakout game. He's had a ton of these targets that are kind of in that mid to deep range that he's dropping or has great coverage on. And the best part about it is that Rivers continues to go back to him. So there's only upside from here. I think that he's due for a big week, and I think that a good week to do that would be this week against the Tennessee Titans. So look for him to bounce back. Couple other guys to start here. Marvin Jones with the Detroit Lions. Now, I talked to a couple people. There was a couple of people on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, feel free to DM me any roster questions you have. If you don't follow me on Twitter at ChuckNastyGG. You can always ask me any roster questions you have. But someone had asked me, hey, is Marvin Jones going to get me 2 points this week to win my matchup? And I'm like, yeah, probably. But he only had 2 catches for 17 yards last week, okay? It was not a good outing for him. There was a big pass interference call that I feel like was missed that prohibited him from getting a bunch more points. But he continues to get a ton of targets. Stafford's looking at him. He just didn't really perform. And the top corner is probably going to be on Kenny Galladay, which is, Trey Waynes. So that means that Marvin Jones is going to get the... I'm sorry. He has the Minnesota Vikings this week. Marvin Jones is going to get Trey Waynes, which means that Xavier Rhodes is going to be on Galladay. So Galladay's got the worst of the 2 matchups, and he's getting some targets. So I think that it'll be a good week. Minnesota is 20th in points allowed to the wide receiver position, so there's only 12 teams worse, about a third of the league. So not a bad matchup for him at all. Another guy that I'm starting this week is Auden Tate. A primary reason why I want to start him this week is because the Jaguars don't have Jalen Ramsey anymore. So they're 22nd in points allowed to the wide receiver position. The best part about that trade with Marcus Peters going to the Ravens and then Aqib Talib, chief chain yanker himself, I will never forget that. Going on IR is they needed somebody and they paid a hefty price for Jalen Ramsey. So the Jaguars secondaries took a big hit from that. And I think that Auden Tate's going to benefit from that this week. I would imagine that the Bengals are going to be trailing the Jaguars, which means that Andy Dalton's going to have to throw the ball. So somebody's got to get those points. Another guy that I have to start, I got 2 more for you. Dante Pettis, 49ers, plays against a sweet matchup. Washington Redskins, 29th in points allowed at the wide receiver position. He hasn't had a good year. He's probably on your waiver, to be honest. But he had a good year last year. He's got potential. He's fast. And the 49ers are going to be throwing the ball a bit. The Skins' defense is not good. Josh Norman is not what he used to be. And look for a lot of these guys in the secondary, corners, and safeties to get totally taken advantage of by the 49ers as they continue on being probably a top 3 team in the NFL right now. Last guy to start this week, Alan Lazard for the Green Bay Packers. There's a pretty good chance that Devontae Adams is not playing this week. I don't know that I've gotten confirmation of that yet, but he's not really practicing. Geronimo Allison, if you watched the game on Monday night, got that concussion on play where the Lions player was clearly going for the ball, but ended up hitting helmet to helmet, drew a flag. The refereeing on that game was another story, but they don't have a ton of wide receivers left to play. Right? MVS didn't practice today. Allison's out with a concussion. Devontae Adams is probably not going to play as well. And the second that Aaron Rodgers tried to trust in Darius Shepard, the ball hit his hands when he was wide open, smacked him in the face, and then got picked off by somebody else. And immediately after that, he threw back-to-back passes. The first one didn't work, was incomplete, to Alan Lazard. And then he went back to him again on the tightest possible coverage, threaded the needle, and Lazard got a touchdown on that last one. So I don't really think that Jake Kumro is going to be relevant. I'm not even sure who else is going to be playing wide receiver in this game. But Lazard clearly has some rapport with Aaron Rodgers, and they get a sweet matchup with the Oakland Raiders secondary that's allowing the 28th most points in points allowed to the wide receiver position. So a couple of sits this week for the wide receiver position. We talked about the Patriots D being really good and sitting Sam Darnold earlier. I am sitting Robby Anderson this week as well. I have actually the stack of the 2 of them in my highest stakes spine, and I haven't gotten anything from it yet so far. I haven't been able to play Darnold because he had, kissing disease, mononucleosis, but the worst part about it is that I've also had Robby Anderson, who's been effectively useless without Sam Darnold. So they're just hanging out on my bench. It's one of those leagues where we can't actually trade. I don't know if you've ever played in a league like that, but all we can do is hawk the waiver wire for other players. And I'm waiting 2 weeks until these guys get a very, very sweet matchup against the Dolphins after they're done with this difficult part of their schedule. And the other guy that I'm sitting this week might be a surprise to you, but scary Terry McLaurin plays against the 49ers. Terry McLaurin is obviously a stud. I mean, the only person that has as many yards and touchdowns in their first games as a rookie season is Randy Moss. My boy Matt sent me that stat, and it's crazy. Like, he's obviously really, really good. There was a bunch of hype around him, when he was being drafted, but I don't know that anybody knew he was going to be this good. The problem is for this week is that he plays the San Francisco 49ers. ODB, Jarvis Landry, Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp have all combined for an average of 6.3 fantasy points to the wide receiver position against San Fran. All right, so it's just not a good matchup, not worth playing. A couple other guys for you, tight ends to start this week. Dawson Knox, Buffalo Bills, has a case of Miami Dolphins fever. Starting him for sure. He's getting a decent amount of snaps. I think he's probably due for a touchdown. Dallas Goedert, playing against Dallas, 28th in points allowed to the tight end position. I think that he's finally going to be healthy, and he got, 5 receptions for 48 yards against the Vikings. He's played more than 70% of snaps, though, in 3 consecutive games. So look for him to pop off against the Cowboys. And then Darren Fells with the Houston Texans against the Indianapolis Colts. I'm starting him this week. The Texans are rolling. Deshaun Watson's really starting to give it a run for that MVP candidate spot. And Fells has been pretty consistent. 6 receptions for 69 yards, 2 for 20 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then 5 for 49 yards and 1 touchdown. So he's getting a good chunk of targets. I don't know that Jordan Akins is actually relevant anymore because it seems like Fells is really taking a lot of his work. And then the couple of sits for this week, I only have a couple guys for you at the tight end position, but Trey Burton, most probably dropped him already, but he is not even worth a roster spot at this point. I ended up drafting him in like the 9th round in one of our PPR leagues, but he's averaging like just over 4 points per game this year. And the Saints are just not good against the tight end anyways. So, their defense being that good and the combination of them playing against Trey Burton, who hasn't really done anything, really good against not good is just not a good matchup for him. Not that you'd want to play him anyways. And the last guy that I would say you want to sit is Jared Cook because he plays against the Chicago Bears. Now, the last couple of weeks, he's had some really, really good games. Like, he's got 26.8 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks. And that's way more than he has done in weeks 1 through 4. But he gets a tough matchup against the Chicago Bears, so I wouldn't risk it. Don't want to start him this week. And then the last thing we have here is we're going to go into my picks for the week in my pick'em pool. I'm taking a little bit of a risk tonight. I feel like that -3 for Kansas City on the road line is a trap. A couple of my homies had said that I'm absolutely nuts for taking Denver at home, but we're going to roll with it. So I'm taking Denver at home against Kansas City. I'm also taking San Fran on the road against Washington. That's not a surprise at all. Buffalo at home against Miami because it's Miami. Houston on the road against Indy. This one I'm pretty unsure of. I mean, it could go either way. The Colts have played everybody pretty tough. But Houston is hot right now, so that's where I'm going. Detroit at home against Minnesota. Jacksonville on the road against Cincy. The Rams on the road against a bad Atlanta Falcons team. Giants at home, who get Saquon and Evan Ingram back, at home against Arizona. Green Bay at home against the Raiders. Even though they have no wide receiving core, that's fine. I think they're still going to win. The Chargers on the road against Tennessee. I don't even know who to pick in this matchup. The Titans have been consistently not that great. Their D's been really good, and they're playing at home. Ryan Tannehill's starting. I don't know if that's good or bad. Probably bad, I guess. And the Chargers are the streakiest team in the NFL. They win some of the most tough matchups. They lose some of the easiest matchups, and they got absolutely spanked by my Broncos a couple of weeks ago, who, might I remind you, are 2-4. So I'm going to take the Chargers and just hope that they decide they want to show up this game, and we'll see. Taking the Chicago Bears at home against the Saints, Seattle at home against the Ravens, Dallas at home against the Eagles. This is another tough matchup. And then New England on the road against the Jets. So that's all I've got for you today. Appreciate you tuning in, hanging out with me in my Sherpa that my wife got me. I'm sure she'll be thrilled that I was wearing this on the video today. But hit the bell and ring it so you get notified any single time that I put a new video up that could benefit your fantasy team. Drop any questions, comments, concerns, or just tell me how much you love the videos. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Down in the comments below. I always try to reply back to the comments down there. I want to help you guys make some money in your leagues. I want to help you get into the playoffs, and hopefully the fantasy gods will shine their exceptionally bright light down upon all of our teams. So good luck this week. Let's go Denver Broncos, baby. Put Patrick Mahomes in his place. I know I'm optimistic it's not going to happen, but we'll see you next week. Good luck.
Guess we'll see you around.
All right, check you later.